In the last video, we talked about why we need a Lambda function, and we talked about what that Lambda function needs to do. In this video, we're going to actually implement that Lambda function. To start with, let's jump ahead and take a look at what the contents of the Lambda function will be. They're included right here. Of course, we need to import any of the modules we're going to use inside of it. Here, you will see the same review to words method that we used at the very top of this notebook. And here, you will see the same bag of words encoding method that we also used earlier on in this notebook. One thing to note is that the bag of words encoding method requires a vocabulary, so we're going to have to make sure to include that in our Lambda function. Now we can look at the Lambda function itself. It's pretty straightforward, but I included lots of comments in case you want to take a look at it yourself. At the top here, we have to make sure to include the vocabulary that we created earlier on using the training set. Then we need to extract the review that is submitted by the user from the body of the event that was passed to the Lambda handler. Once we do that, we need to clean up the review by removing any HTML tags and any punctuation. Next, we construct a bag of words encoding of our review. Once we have the bag of words encoded review, we can invoke the endpoint that we've created, making sure to include the endpoint name, and making sure to serialize the bag of words encoding of our review. Once we get the response, we read it back, convert it to a string, and then for convenience, we round it either to 1, meaning that the review is positive, or 0, meaning the review is negative. Lastly, we return the result to whoever called us. So how do we actually go and set this up? Well, there are two things we need to do. In addition to creating the Lambda function itself, we need to give that Lambda function permission to use a SageMaker endpoint. So let's set up a new role that our Lambda function will have. To do that, we go back to the Amazon console and we scroll all the way down to Security, Identity, and Compliance and click on I am. Our goal is to create a new role for our Lambda function. So on the left-hand side, we click on Roles. And then we click on the Create Role button because we'd like to create a new role. Now, our new role is going to be for a Lambda function. So we select Lambda function under the service that will use this role. Then we click on Next. Now, what permissions do we want to give our Lambda function? Well, we want to give it access to SageMaker. So if we type SageMaker into the search bar and then scroll down, you will see SageMaker Full Access. Make sure to click on the checkbox to the left to include the SageMaker Full Access permissions to this role. Click on Next, and now we need to give this role a name. I'm going to call mine Lambda SageMaker Role to remind me that this is a role for Lambda that provides access to SageMaker. And if we click on Create Role, the role will be created for us. Great. So that's the first step. We've now set up a role for our Lambda function to have. Now we need to set the Lambda function up itself. If we again go back to the main Amazon console, and this time under Compute, we click on Lambda, we can create a new Lambda function. We would like to start from scratch, and we need to name our function. I'm going to call mine Sentiment Lambda Function. Since we're using Python in this course, we need to make sure to set the runtime to Python 3.6. Lastly, we need to give this Lambda function a role. Of course, we want to use the role that we just created. So we leave this at choose an existing role, and then we choose the role that we created from this drop-down menu here. Now clicking on Create, our Lambda function has been created. If you scroll down, we can see the code for our Lambda function. Currently, it doesn't do much at all. However, if we go back to the notebook, scrolling down, we can copy and paste the function that I've provided here. So we select it, copy, and paste. Remember, there are two things that we need to add to this Lambda function. The first is the name of the endpoint that we've deployed. Heading back to the notebook, remember that we can get the name of the endpoint by typing xgbpredictor.endpoint. So if we copy this and paste it over here, now our Lambda function knows which endpoint to use. The second thing we need to add here is the vocabulary object. Going back to our notebook, we can print the vocabulary so that we can copy it and paste it into the Lambda function. Once we've done that, click on Save. So currently our Lambda function has been set up. Let's create a test event to test it. In the drop-down menu right here where it says Select Test Event, click on Configure Test Events. This is how you can add a new one. We want to create a new test event, and our event template, scrolling all the way up to the top, is going to be API Gateway AWS Proxy. Our event name is just going to be Test Event. As you can see, our test event is going to send a whole bunch of data to our Lambda function. But the only bit of data that our Lambda function cares about is the body entry, which we are going to replace with a review we wish to send our Lambda function. So let's plug in a very simple example review. Let's just say, the movie was horrible. I do not recommend this at all. Clicking on Create will then create this test event. Now that this test event has been selected, I can click on Test, and the result is 0, meaning that my model thinks that the review I entered was negative. So far so good, our Lambda function is working. However, how do we get our website to use it? Well, we're going to have to create our own endpoint using API Gateway, and that's what we'll do in the next video.